So as Jason mentioned, my area of responsibility at SAP is the products that make up SAP Leonardo. And I thought it would be useful maybe to spend a few minutes on what exactly is SAP Leonardo and what is it meant to solve, what can it do for you. So one of the things that we have heard over and over and over again, so much so that we're probably all maybe a little bit tired of hearing about it, is transformation. Digital transformation or otherwise business transformation. We all need to transform something, but what exactly does that mean? And I was talking with Gartner in the last couple of weeks about what they're seeing in trends, both in commercial enterprise, public sector, transformation projects. Like what kinds of things are they really seeing implemented at scale? And they've started talking about transformation projects in two different categories. The first is what they call true transformation, and that is the kinds of things that we're familiar with, stories like Uber or Airbnb, where really businesses were completely disrupted, industries were completely disrupted. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you could tell your grandmother the story of Uber disrupting the taxi industry in basic terms? It's a pretty simple story, right? Same question, how about Airbnb with hotels? We all know those stories pretty well. Right? Why do we know those stories? We don't drive taxis or own taxi companies. It's because there are only a few of those stories that are really great. There are only a few of those unicorn kind of transformations that have happened. And so Gartner has started talking about this other category of transformation because it's actually what most of us are really trying to focus on every day, which is optimization, process efficiency, doing things that we already do a little bit better. Not massive disruption of the way that we serve our customers, not massive disruption of the way that we run our business or our agency every day. And that's an important distinction in Gartner's view because they feel like the concept of transformation has gotten a little bit watered down by every project being tagged as transformation in order to get people excited and get the budget set aside to do it. For most of the customers that I meet with, optimization and process efficiency, doing what they're already doing a little bit better, is really where they're focused. And UPS is one of my favorite stories. I could have picked from 100, but UPS was trying to figure out how to save fuel cost. And they hired a couple of really smart people in a team that they called their advanced analytics team. And what they did was they applied some math and some statistics to figuring out how to reduce fuel cost. And it turns out that in the US, if you can make a right turn on a red light, you can save a lot of gas over waiting to make a left turn at a red light where you have to wait until it turns green. So one of the things that they did was optimize their routes vigorously to take advantage of always making right turns at stoplights. They did obviously a few other things as well. They've saved 85 million driven miles a year just by optimizing the routes that they take using advanced analytics. They also had another problem that was causing them a lot of fuel and also was not really contributing to their environmental programs, which was when a driver gets out of the truck, they're supposed to switch the engine off so the truck doesn't idle while they go up to the door and deliver a package. I don't know if you've ever watched a UPS driver go down the street, how many times they get in and out of the truck. They don't have time to think about turning the truck off and then waiting to turn it back on every time. It's just not efficient for them. So they didn't bother. They just left the truck sitting in the street idling. What UPS figured out was that with a fairly cheap sensor in the seat, anytime the driver's rear end came off the seat, they could shut the engine off. And then when he sat back down or she sat back down, the engine turned itself back on so that it was no longer an option. And by doing that, they've saved something like 100 million idle minutes per year in their trucks. And those two things come together for them to create quite a lot of cost savings and efficiency in the way that they operate. And I tell that story because they didn't start out to do a transformation project. They started out to save some money on fuel. What that turned into was a set of cost savings that's created for them a competitive advantage in the way that they're able to deliver packages for a certain cost point. And let's be honest, if you need to get a package from here to San Francisco, do you really care that much if it goes FedEx, UPS, or DHL? I mean, it's mostly a commodity business of getting a package from here to there, and there's lots of competition. So they created a real advantage in the way that they're able to operate because of the fact that they started doing something that was an efficiency-driven project that then became for them transformative because it put them in a better competitive position. And the conversation with Gartner that I was having about the kind of trends that they're seeing were very much along those lines. The projects didn't really start out as big transformation projects. They started out as optimization and efficiency projects and then turned into something that became transformative because of the results that they were able to see. And I mention that only because it's very easy to get a little deer in the headlights about these idea of multi-year, multi-million-dollar transformation projects. The truth is that quite a lot of those projects do not succeed. And I'll give you a couple of statistics on that in just a minute. But Jason shared some slides with me and some stats with me around some things that came from the GAO about just how much money is there for the taking for us being a little bit more efficient and running a little bit more efficiently the operations of agencies and groups that are in this room. We see similar sort of staggeringly large numbers in commercial areas. There's a lot of opportunity to drive more efficiency. There's a lot of opportunity to do things a little bit better and realize significant efficiencies. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is how we can help with some of that with SAP Leonardo. And hopefully it'll be an interesting set of information. So when we look at transformation projects, I mentioned that quite a lot of them fail, and they fail for different reasons. I suspect that all of you, as I talk through this slide, will see yourselves in at least one of these areas a little bit, but there's a lot of experimentation in sandboxes. Somebody has a great idea and says, hey boss, I heard about this machine learning thing and I think it could be really fun. I think we could figure out some things that we don't know if we just downloaded some software and played around with machine learning. And I've got a couple of people who are really excited about machine learning, and we're gonna go do a little project and we'll come back and tell you how it works. And they go and they do something and it's really interesting. And when they're done, they can't quite figure out how to turn that little experiment in a sandbox into something that serves the whole agency, that really can scale to help everybody, right? Can really make a difference. It's interesting innovation, but we can't figure out how to apply it to the whole mission. Tactical implementations, we see a lot of that, a lot of band-aids on problems. We need to figure out how to solve this one problem, so we just solve it over here, and then we've got another problem, so we put another band-aid on it using some technology. And in the end, what you have is a mismatch of band-aids, and none of them really work together in a coordinated way, so you're missing a lot of opportunity for things to work together, and you end up with things like data silos, where you have interesting data, but it's scattered all over the place, and you can't figure out how to bring it all together to solve a bigger problem. Launching big initiatives is, as it turns out, in a lot of cases, a really good way to limit your career. You go and ask for a massive budget for a massive multi-year transformation, and at the end of it, you're either the hero or you're in big trouble. But you have to wait a long time in either case to figure out whether you're going to get the results that you're looking for. And then, of course, there's the option of doing nothing, which is usually also not great. I mention this because as I talk to my customers, as I talk to many of you, some of you are doing one or two of these, some of you are doing all of these in some place, and none of them are really getting quite the results that you're hoping for in terms of the results that you need to achieve in order to run well. So as we had those conversations over and over and over again with customers about the things that they were trying to do to solve their business problems, trying to solve their issues, the ways that they were experimenting or trying to solve them that weren't working, we started finding some themes and things that we thought there was a better way to do that. And so we created Leonardo to help drive faster innovation and lower that risk of wasting money, wasting time, wasting resources, spending a lot of effort that doesn't deliver on the return. And so how do we do that is kind of the question. Most of you in the room know SAP pretty well. I'm just curious, a show of hands. You guys don't seem to enjoy raising your hands. Maybe I should do something else. How many of you feel like you know SAP pretty well as a company? Okay, I'll double that for the ones of you who don't want to raise your hands. Our process expertise is really one of the things that sets SAP apart as a company, whether it's in your space or in private enterprise. We see a staggering amount of the world's revenue-based transactions. So whether it's oil and gas or whether it's manufacturing, I mean the number of transactions we see and the processes that are tied back to those transactions, that's really the heart and soul of SAP, and we understand it really well. We've invested in industry experts and industry expertise across 25 industries for the last 40 years. So regardless of what the industry is, we have some people who know it pretty well. And we also have a pretty amazing ecosystem of partners, some of whom are in the room today. For the things that we don't do or don't do as well as others, we've really invested in building out that ecosystem. And the question was, how do we bring all of that together with some of the technologies that everybody's talking about, like machine learning and the Internet of Things, to figure out how we can innovate faster together with our customers and do it in a way that lowers the risk of failed projects and wasted money and things that don't actually deliver value. One of the key ingredients there is together with you as customers. So as I tell you a little bit more about SAP Leonardo, please keep in mind that one of the most important ingredients for us is co-innovation, working together with our customer to solve a problem. So SAP Leonardo is not about building a fully completed shrink-wrapped product and handing it to you and talking about how it gets implemented. It's much more about building things that are accelerating, helping you go faster, helping move that innovation along faster, but really co-innovating with you to solve new problems and solve problems that may be unique to your area. So I love my little race car analogy, but I'll skip over it in the interest of time. So let me give you an example of something that we did in that space. Vale is a $30 billion a year mining company based in Brazil. When I think about things like machine learning, it's hard sometimes to think about how that might impact my world, or machine learning seems like sort of this big thing. I know that there are massive projects that are happening around big transformative things. Vale had a very simple problem, and it was an optimization-driven sort of problem. They have a bunch of different shifts that work in the mines and a bunch of different shifts that work in their offices, and all those people from time to time create purchase requisitions. I know we all love the procurement process, so I thought I'd talk about it. The purchase requisitions that they create are obviously meant to buy something, from a paperclip to a multi-million-dollar machine. Once that thing is delivered, an invoice shows up, and matching that purchase requisition to the invoice should be fairly simple. I have a purchase requisition, you send me an invoice, it references the purchase requisition, I match those two, and the bill gets paid. Except the reality is it doesn't happen that way. Some of their vendors were really good about attaching the purchase requisition number to the invoice, some weren't. So they had to go back and sort of figure out, is this the right part that I ordered? Did I receive what I ordered? And they were doing several thousand manual reconciliations every week of purchase requisitions, again, from little things like paper clips all the way to huge things like multi-million-dollar machines. And so they had a whole team in the finance department, the office of the CFO, that all they did was reconcile these purchase requisitions to invoices. And they asked us if we could find some way to help make that process a little bit smoother. And it started out as a conversation about process, because the back-end system that they use for receiving and paying invoices runs on SAP. What it turned into was a machine learning-based project where we trained a machine learning model to match the invoices with the purchase requisitions using years and years of history of purchase requisitions, what they bought, from whom did they buy it, what were the types of things they bought, what were the invoices, how did they come in, what did they typically look like when they came in. And the machine is now able to match about 76% of the purchase requisitions to invoices that were previously having to be manually reconciled. So they've now taken that team of people in the office of the CFO who were previously working on this pretty mundane, boring task, and they've retasked those people to do higher value things. They're now looking for new ways that the company can save money or make money, as opposed to doing this sort of boring, mundane task. This didn't start out as a transformational project for them. But this one led to another initiative that we're working on with them, which led to another. And now they're starting to see the opportunity to apply machine learning in a much broader way to solve these same sorts of problems, but in a much broader context for the company. And they're now thinking about how not just to use it for driving efficiency, but also for really transforming the way that they're working with their employees and changing the purchasing experience, working with their end customers and changing the customer experience. And so it's really kind of mushroomed into this very interesting set of projects. But it didn't start out as a massive multi-year transformational thing. It started out as a very focused piece of innovation around a very specific business problem. And it's grown from there, which we're finding is really the right formula, the right recipe for transformation. It's not about massive projects, massive multi-year things that may or may not deliver the right result at the end. It's about going in quick sprints of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and trying to solve a very discrete problem, but do it very quickly to prove out that the technology that you're using, the approach that you're using is the right one, and then building on that. So thinking of innovation, thinking of digital transformation, if you will, more as a maturity curve than a big bang. It's about taking incremental steps to become a little bit better. And that's what Volley's doing. That's what a lot of our customers are doing. And that's really how we built SAP Leonardo. It's intended to be not a huge upfront project, very heavy. It's actually intended to start with a methodology that we've found to be very useful. For those of you who've worked with SAP for a long time, you probably know that one of our founders, Hasso Plattner, is very passionate about design thinking. So much so, in fact, that he funded the design school at Stanford University and created essentially an institute for design thinking. We're fortunate to have one of the professors there as our chief design officer, and it really started about 10 or 12 years ago at SAP, trying to think about how we design better products. Design products that our customers actually love to use, as opposed to designing projects that our engineers love to build. Design thinking is an exercise of getting the right people together from your office, from our office, the right experts from both sides, and thinking about what are the problems that we need to solve, what are the opportunities that we have, without focusing on the constraints, without focusing on all the reasons why we can't solve that, we can't do this, we can't move that ball forward. From a design thinking exercise, where we go next is into sort of the prioritization process. That's the end. Is we've got 10 problems. They're all interesting to someone, but what are the capabilities that you have? What are the capabilities we have? What are the capabilities our global ecosystem of partners have, where we can bring those together and really solve that problem or really move it forward in a meaningful way? And then those things bubble to the top. Those things are the ones that we would prioritize working on. From there, there's a process that's part of design thinking called design doing. Many of us would refer to that as prototypes, right? Building prototypes. So rather than having a multi-year project where we build something and then roll it out and hand it to somebody and say, I hope this is what you wanted, it's more about building a prototype in a couple of weeks that you then hand to a user and say, play with this and tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. One of the biggest problems in transformation projects is adoption. There are all kinds of reasons why adoption doesn't happen. Maybe I just really love the system that I use today. Maybe I think it's the coolest thing ever. Maybe I had a hand in designing it. And so I'm going to kind of resist whatever you bring to me because it wasn't my idea. So as you pull people into working with you on helping evaluate that prototype, you start getting their buy-in, you start getting their consensus, you start getting them to be part of the design as opposed to just being a receiver at the end of it. And we tend to find that drives adoption rates much higher. It also helps you build a better product, by the way, which is why we're so enthralled with using design thinking to design our products. In the end, if we don't design great products, you guys buy from somebody else. And so we use design thinking to make sure that we're pulling customers and partners and the people who will ultimately use the product very close to us in the product design, so that when we deliver the finished product, it's something that people are excited about using and that meets exactly the requirements that they had. So we then take that prototype and turn it into an implementation blueprint. We've all had situations where we bought something new and nobody considered how you were going to take that new thing and make it work with all the things you already have. So that's also one of the things that Forbes, in a recent article, pointed out is the number one reason why transformation projects fail. There was some really interesting, innovative technology that was brought in, but whoever brought it in didn't really think about how to connect it to everything else. So I've got this great thing, but it only works in a silo. It only works in the corner. It doesn't work across all the systems that I already have. So making sure that we can connect that prototype, that idea that we have, back to all the existing systems, and that can be used to build out a good business case, a good ROI model for if we make this investment in building this thing that we've innovated, can we connect it to the things we already have and do it at a reasonable cost for the benefits that it'll generate. So then we come to all the buzzwords. So what are we actually building with? What is the actual thing that we're prototyping? The technologies that most of us are thinking about for innovation these days have to do with the ones where there's a lot of potential for benefit. So for those of you who manage fleets of vehicles, the idea of the Internet of Things and having sensors on those vehicles so that you know where they are, know how people are driving, making sure that they're not being used for personal use when they shouldn't be, making sure that you understand the maintenance requirements so that you can take them out of service only when they need to be maintained. There's a lot of potential in managing a fleet more efficiently if you have a connected fleet. So the Internet of Things is an exciting idea. Some of you are probably thinking about machine learning and thinking about maybe your mind has gone to some of the use cases that are like that invoice matching where you think, man, if I could figure out how to match this with that and not have to use a lot of people to do it, I sure could be more efficient in the way I operate. These are the kinds of technologies where we hear about them and we hear about the use cases, and immediately there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of thought about how I might be able to use it. The question is which ones of those thoughts actually are great ideas that will generate a positive experience, positive return. So we're using these technologies like blockchain and machine learning and aggregated anonymized data where we can look for patterns across many different data sets without revealing personal information. Those are the kinds of things that we're using as part of the prototypes as we identify these problems that need to be solved and think about how we might solve them together. The trick with these technology buzzwords is that if you're trying to solve a real problem, like how do I make more efficient use of all the vehicles in my fleet, no one technology solves that problem. You have to bring them together in order to actually solve the problem. And so what we've done with Leonardo in these technologies is we've built these capabilities on top of a common underlying platform, so that things like a common data model, things like bringing all of your data from one area together with the things that you need to use that data for, which may involve other areas, are solved for rather than having to stitch it all together. So for example, in a connected fleet, having the sensors just gives me a whole bunch of data, but I don't think anybody in this room is having a problem of not having enough data these days. Most of us have too much. And so the question then is, well, what do I do with that data to actually solve my fleet problem? The sensors themselves don't solve any problems. They just get you more data. You have to connect that with things like machine learning, where you can apply patterns that you know to that data to get some insight that you didn't have before. And it's great that a machine is generating a bunch of information and a bunch of patterns and telling you what you should do, but how do you make sure that people actually have the information in their hand to make the right decision at the right time? So that then comes to application design and building a front-end application. It may be something in the form of a visualization like business intelligence, or it may be something that's more like an interactive application that you'd put on a mobile or an iPad or a desktop where somebody can then interact with that data and make meaningful decisions. And then there's that integration part. Right? You have to figure out, so once you've got the IoT and the machine learning and maybe it's business intelligence, you've got that all working to solve that innovative use case. You have to connect that back to the systems that manage the fleet of vehicles today. You have to figure out how to connect that back so that you're not doing everything in two different systems, right? It just would never be adopted. And so that's where really being able to connect the innovation back to the core systems becomes so important. And so with Leonardo, what we've really tried to do is we've tried to build a set of what we call accelerators that address these particular use cases. And the idea of the accelerators is to stitch these various technologies together, focused around a very specific use case. And as you look up here, you'll notice one of the things that you don't see is US federal government. You don't see any accelerators that we've built specifically in that area. But there are quite a lot of the accelerators that have been built in commercial spaces that are very applicable for people in this room. So for example, in retail, one of the things that we have done with a retail customer is around cold chain logistics. So think about refrigerated and frozen goods that they need to make sure are refrigerated and frozen correctly for food safety reasons. You think about that and what it involves. It involves sensors on refrigerators, sensors potentially on pallets of goods, and then monitoring the temperature and the conditions of the refrigerator or the cooler. What we've done there is very applicable to vaccine storage. If you have a batch of vaccines, you're going to store those someplace. It needs to be stored at a certain temperature. You need to know if the temperature changes. You need to know if that cooling system fails so that you can not have loss of all the vaccines. Same thing with connected fleets. Most of the work that we've done in that area is with commercial fleets, but obviously the federal government operates some of the largest fleets of vehicles around, and so what we've done in commercial is very applicable here. And so we'd love to talk with you more about some of the industry accelerators that we've put in place. Jason, maybe you want to come up and talk about some of the ideas that we have for how we could translate some of this stuff into the folks in this room and their direct business areas.
Yeah, I think with this session is going back to design thinking. We worked with the state of Indiana, and some of you may have heard this story in the past, but then Governor Pence, now Vice President Pence, had an aggressive agenda, and he said, I want to improve our infant mortality rate. So that's a problem statement. It's too high. So he tasked the state and the CIO to work together to bring data across different parts and different agencies who maybe didn't speak together to see how they could effectively solve this problem. And when I was having dinner with the CIO a couple years ago, one of the most interesting things about the stories is that I always hear people when I talk to them about, what's some of your challenges, and they'll go, I know what my challenges are. They're too hard to fix, or I can't do this. And when I thought about infant mortality, he asked me, Jason, take a guess what's affecting it. And I said, alcohol, tobacco, drug addiction, all this thing. He goes, yep, and we have billboards and all this stuff. He says, by putting data together, using machine learning, using these visualizations, creating these dashboards, what they found was that mothers couldn't get through their appointments. It was transportation. That was the leading problem. So I think one of the things when you look at Leonardo and working with SAP is as we go through this design thinking, I think one of the natural things is that we always assume we know what the problem is and we know how to solve it. When we really get into data and we start applying these technologies, we may find it's actually something completely different. And I think that's how we can work together to build rapid prototypes in weeks and not years, and continue to solve critical challenges for government.
So when we talk about faster innovation with less risk, part of that lowering the risk profile is about making sure that we identify the right problem in the first place. To the point that Jason made, the problem in that case has many layers, but there's a very simple aspect of the problem of transportation that was pretty easy to pick off and think about how you would solve. And that's really what we aim to do in very short sprints with Leonardo, is deliver results on a very focused problem area very quickly, as opposed to trying to solve the whole problem all in one bite, which could take years and a whole lot of money and may or may not actually solve the problem in the end. But to Jason's point, one of the things that we really try to do with every project that we work on with customers around Leonardo is make sure that it is a co-innovated project. It is something that we are doing very closely together with you and your experts, together with us and our experts, so that we bring the right people together to identify that right problem and identify the right way to focus on it, and really are able to deliver those results very quickly. So we'd love to engage with you at the breaks or after the session today to talk more about some of the ideas where we might be able to help in your specific space. So Jason and I were talking a little bit yesterday, and I wanted to make sure we mentioned this. We have SAP Leonardo Innovation Centers that we've stood up around the world. The closest one to DC is in New York City. So when we do these design thinking sessions, typically we try to bring customers where we can into our SAP Leonardo Innovation Centers, because we have a great concentration of experts there, but we also have a lot of great technology there that you can play with, sort of like sort of like an innovation factory, if you think about it that way. It's also something that we can do with you here locally, but if you have the opportunity and you want to engage with us in one of these, coming to one of our SAP Leonardo Innovation Centers is a really great experience. It's going to get you out of the four walls of your office and start thinking about some of the things and touching some of the actual technology that has the ability to do some cool transformative things. So thanks very much for your time. Look forward to speaking with you later. Thanks, Jason.